My biggest inspiration is my ability to get stuff done, and knowing that when I've done that thing, whatever it may be, whether that's personal or professional, I can look back and know that I've done that to the best of my ability.
What does that do for you? I mean, we know that because so many of us, we try to get things done, like the ultimate to-do list, the never-ending to-do list. But so how, but I suppose, when does that finish, and what does it give for you as a person?
I don't know when it finishes. I don't think I want it to finish, I guess is the right thing to say. And I think if I do get to that point when I've ran out of things to do, well, I can't think how that's going to feel, because that's what I've done my whole career, my whole life, and today, every weekend, every work day, every evening, there's always a to-do list, and there's always something that I want to get finished. I guess that's who I am. My whole self and the way that I present myself is I get stuff done. And I've always got stuff done, and I think I always want to get stuff done. So, whether that's well into my retirement and, continuing to try and stay fit and healthy, or whether that's, new challenges that I take on in my life when fitness and other things are beyond me, who knows? But I'd like to think that I never stop getting stuff done.
So where did this start? Let's have a look back at where you started in terms of your to-do list, going right to the beginning of the to-do list. Tell me about your start in your career.
It's pretty unconventional, I think. I left school at 16. My mother worked in finance. My father was an engineer. I had no intention of going to university. I quite fancied the idea of being an accountant, but I realized that I had to go to university to get there. So that wasn't an option. So I took up engineering. I did an apprenticeship scheme in the UK with a large UK engineering company. That involved a year in a training centre, a year on the shop floor, and then a year in the drawing office. And the most important part of that was the year on the shop floor. That's where I learned how to listen to people that really knew how to do their job, people that had worked on the same machine, making the same steam turbine rotor blades for 30 years. And they would tell me things about how management didn't listen, how they could do things differently if they were allowed to have a voice, but they were just told to follow rules. And that then really resonated with me. And throughout my career, I've always walked the shop floor. I've always looked in people's eyes. I've always wanted to talk to the people that are dealing with the problems, rather than talking to the managers that are telling me there are problems on the shop floor. And that's been a huge part of, of how I get stuff done, is by getting to the root cause, getting to the, not being afraid of getting to the nub of the problem, and then saying, okay, now I understand the problem properly, and whether that's through technical tools, 5 whys, root cause analysis, or whatever it may be, get to the bottom of the problem first. And then you can think about whether people, or whether there's a team that's required, or process or technology that's required to solve the problem.
So this is interesting, because you had this engineering start rather than finance. And then the biggest part of that for you was seeing what was happening, having these conversations, having these relationships. So what has engineering, being on the shop floor, this conversation, how has that carried through the rest of your career?
I think it's certainly given me an edge, worked through. I stayed in that company for 25 years, moving into finance, working my way through finance. My first job in the finance team was opening the post, because frankly, I wasn't qualified to do anything else. But once my professional career started to develop, the ability to talk in an engineering company to engineers, it's only basic engineering qualifications, but it's there. It's something that sets you apart into, not just looking at the numbers, trying to understand the technical aspects of the job, and then trying to marry those things together. And then that's a really, really important part of how I've progressed and how I've managed to kind of, build relationships, be on the right page with the technical side, and in a very technical environment, understanding the technical problem, and being able to interpret that in terms of numbers, risks, opportunities, in a commercial sense, in a litigation sense, however it may create itself. I think that's really important as well, in terms of, not just being the finance guy or the numbers guy in the room.
What does it mean to not just be the finance guy and the numbers guy?
That's a great question, because it's okay to be a numbers guy and a finance guy. It's okay, but it depends where you want to get to in your career. And I've found, certainly through, the several finance management leadership positions I've had, you've got to build the relationships with the rest of the team. And I think there's an expectation on the finance person as well, that you need to be the challenger in a widest sense. You've got to be the person that's not afraid of saying, well, hang on a minute, I don't think that's correct, or can I just challenge you on that? Can I just check that we've got this right? And I think having some technical background certainly helps. It gives you more confidence, at the very least, to go into that conversation thinking, as the finance person, yes, I can challenge, and I have a right to challenge in this room.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because challenge is one of those words that can go one of two ways. So in some ways, like, there's a challenge, like it's a call to action, a call to adventure, that where we want to take part and we want to get involved. But then also on the flip side of that, challenge can also be very defensive, very aggressive. What has your experience been in terms of how you challenge?
I've changed enormously, and I've changed my view on how important challenge is in a role, and how you apply it. If we wind back kind of 10, 12, 15 years ago, when I was making my way as a finance manager, as a finance director, this was a big company, 110,000 employees, and you kind of had to make your presence known to be heard. And soft skills and other things have developed over the years, generally speaking, but in those days, it really was about, the strongest person in the room with the strongest voice gets heard, gets followed, and that's how decisions were made and instructions were given. That doesn't work today, and I've certainly learned the hard way over the last 10 years that you really got to soften your management style. It doesn't mean to say that you stop challenging. So I challenge every day my team. We're always striving to get better. We're always trying to get better information, get to the bottom of problems better, so we can be better as a team. So challenge has never gone away, but the way I do it now is far more collaborative, far more open questions, trying to get the ownership of the problem across the table and jointly owned by everybody. And I think once you have that, and you can do that in a softer way, in a conversational way, then for me, you build up the trust within the team, but you also get the results through the team, rather than just insisting that results happen and deadlines are met. It's much easier just saying to the team, let's do this together, and things still get done.
There's something that I just want to clarify. You said being the strongest person in the room, the strongest voice in the room. Could I understand what that looks like?
I was a beast, I was not necessarily a nice person, and it took me several years to understand that leaving a company, I transitioned in 2013 from this 25-year career in Alstom, and moved to the UK. So I was living in Europe at the time. I moved back to the UK, and I went into a room and decided I knew everything about the content of that meeting. And I pushed my way through the meeting. And I know now, because my fiance is the person that I was attacking in the room. She wasn't my fiance at the time, but I know now that the feeling when the rest of the team walked out of the room was, who is he? And he's never going to be successful. You can't just bulldoze your way through situations. It just doesn't. And I don't think that's just a UK environment, but, coming from that kind of foreign company, larger company culture and organization, where I was, encouraged to be more beastly, to be more successful, clearly doesn't work and didn't work. And I learned the hard way. It took me 4 or 5 years to rebuild those relationships and get people to want to trust me, and to do that, I had to change significantly, no doubt.
So when was the first moment that you realized that it wasn't working for you?
I was starting to lose focus in the boardroom. You know, the senior leaders weren't taking me serious, and I decided to make a couple of changes. One, I grew a beard because my coach said I looked too young, baby faced, to be credible in front of the elderly gentlemen in the executive team. So she said, you know, grow a beard and you may look a bit more mature. The second thing I did, which seems really silly, is I stopped wearing a tie. And I remember the first day I walked in and sat in the boardroom in a meeting with the CEO, and he kind of leaned back on the table, and he was a no tie, sleeves rolled up kind of guy, and he looked across the table and he just smiled at me. He's like, Ian, welcome to the table. And that changed everything for me, knowing that I then, you know, the CEO was like, I'm so glad you did that. I didn't have to tell you to, but you've just relaxed in front of us. And I really enjoy the relaxed Ian rather than the uptight, tie-wearing, professional, or overly professional finance guy in the room.
That's amazing. I mean, just even that moment, just such a small thing made such a huge impact. No, and you could say in that room, but actually that room, you know, feeds down to so much more in an organization. And so I'm just wondering, it's like, as soon as you said the CEO doesn't wear a tie, did you feel that then maybe it was the culture that you were adapting to, and it was recognizing actually who I need to be in, or how do I fit in, not who I need to be, but how do I fit in with this culture, and what does that do for me?
Yeah, I think it wasn't necessarily a company culture. You know, there were a lot of tie-wearing people still in the room, but I think there was an acceptance in terms of, if you're going to get to the top table, then yes, there is certain adaptation that you need to give as the finance guy, or any member of that table, frankly, to kind of show up and say, okay, I'm part of this team. And try and understand the culture, you know, read the room and make sure that you can be part of that in a very kind of positive and relaxed way, you know, and then that breeds, you know, a different kind of behavior. You know, I always wanted to be, you know, the first person to comment on every issue. I was always pushing, I know the answer to this. I know how to do this. I want to be the first person to give the answer. Yeah. And I have had feedback over the years that said, Ian, you know, people know you know the answer. It's okay if you don't say it. And sometimes people are nervous because they waited for you to speak first. And that's not building the right culture and the right rhythm to the meeting. So please hold back, breathe, relax, listen to the conversation, and then please, we want your contribution. Please feel free to add your contribution, but try not to kind of drive the meeting with your contribution. Let others feel confident in speaking, and then you can step in.
I don't mean to be, I don't know, direct here, but that can't have been easy to hear, in a sense.
You know what? I've never struggled with feedback. I ever struggled with feedback. You know, there's nothing that anybody's ever said to me throughout my career where I thought, that's too hard, that's not fair. I've always had the ability to kind of self-reflect and decide, you know, how do I course correct? Not if, it's always how. You know, is it a subtle thing? Is it a major transit? You know, and this was one of those moments where I've always been able to say, stop, think, yeah, can you see how you turn up? Can you see how that might impact others? You know, and my trick for that is I go to bed, I don't sleep very well, and then I wake up the next day knowing that I fixed the problem. It's very rare that I go to sleep with the problem and wake up with the problem still. It's kind of my time where I kind of get things fixed in my own. And I've always tried to wake up in the morning knowing that the problem that I had in front of me was now solved, and all I had to do then was to go and put it into practice. And again, whether that's a personal thing or a career thing, it always transpires in the same way. Okay, you wake up, everything's fresh. Let's go see whether we can course correct and make that thing better.
That's an amazing mindset to have. And because a lot of people would struggle with, well, first of all, struggle with speaking up sometimes at all and collating their thoughts. So you've always had that ability to just go straight in and make sure that, you know, you could jump in and contribute. But to balance that also with a really humble attitude when it comes to learning from others, and just always, I mean, it really is the definition of growth mindset in terms of, oh no, I'd love to be better. Thank you so much for telling me and giving me this information, and it can be difficult. I mean, I struggle from certain people, probably family, if I get, I see it as criticism, but I am very self-critical in the way that I am. And I know that people listening to this can also be that. So it's a wonderfully refreshing point of view to have that ability. So okay, we're going through, you've developed, you've got already this growth mindset and this ability to be humble and this ability to self-reflect and as you say, adjust and move forward. What was a challenge for you to move from beast to where you are now?
The biggest challenge is to get other people to accept that you have changed. And that really upset me actually at times, when people that had seen me go through this transition didn't believe that somebody could change, and didn't believe that, okay, yeah, well, when I had 360 feedbacks, I remember one in particular, as a leadership team, we sat down with coaches in a room, and I was getting the same feedback. And I strongly believed I'd changed, and 3/4 of the room were telling me, welcome Ian, we much prefer this version of Ian than the old version of Ian. It's, thank you for accepting the challenge and the feedback, and trying your best as a human being to turn up differently and to be genuine about it. But there was still a portion of the room that was saying, no, I remember how you were. And those people were really hard to change, really hard to get, discretionary efforts out of, to be friends in an executive team. And that took a lot of work. I'd like to think that, over the next 12 months following that particular dinner, that I got there, maybe not 100%, but, with the vast majority of the exec team, that they were saying, actually, yes. And shame on me for not feeling strong enough to recognize that he's seen in himself, and that he's reflected in himself, and being genuine about that change.
And how did that reflect in what you were working on at the time in terms of the results and the performance?
I think it brought up more confidence through the rest of the team. That they felt that they had a bigger contribution to play, and that brought a much greater level of diversity of thought into the room, allowing some of the managing directors, some of the functional staff to speak up and say, okay, this is my view, and I'm okay saying it now because the vibe has changed. The finance guy is no longer going to tell me what my view is. The finance guy is going to no longer, shoot me down if I say the wrong thing. The finance guy is now going to sit there and go, yeah, okay, that's cool. That I can see that. I respect your opinion, and yeah, let's go with it. And I followed that through. The last 2 years in particular have been, because I changed company, gave me that ability to kind of shed this past and move to a new company where nobody knew the old me, and that gave me the ability, that gave me the confidence to say, okay, if you turn up in a new company on day one, being your whole self, and you carry that through naturally, and you still have the energy at the end of every day to spend time with the family, etc., then that's the real you. And I know I've done that now after 2 years in another company. I know I can look back and say I had made that transition, and some people were respecting that, not quite everybody. But changing companies actually really helped me. Not that I'm saying, the best way to improve yourself is changing companies. I've only worked for 3 companies in my career. It's definitely not worked for me. But I know, I'm sure now that I can hold my head up and say, this is my whole self going to work every day, the real me.
And what's that been like for you? I mean, we've heard the impact for other people and who you are as a leader and a manager, but what about you?
It's great. It makes you more relaxed. It gives you the ability to be yourself, and to not be afraid. We're only human. We all have things that we're not great at. We all make mistakes, and the ability to just say, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing this weekend. I didn't have a particularly good day yesterday because or we had a really difficult meeting yesterday because, and then, you know, just know that your style's relaxed in the room, that you've got the respect of the team to say, yeah, we've reflected on that too, you know, and it's just much nicer knowing that can work, you know. And it's also nice, I think lockdown's helped as well, because, you know, there's two of us working in the house, you know, and sometimes the kids have been around as well. And that tells you as well, you know, if other people in the house are saying, who was that in that meeting, you know, and then you come out to you, Mr. Smiley, you know, father figure. It's not consistent. And, you know, I think lockdowns helped me as well be more consistent, to show that consistency in my personal life.
And that's incredible. But it's, as you say, it's so interesting, just even the phrase lockdown has helped in terms of, because everything has been blended. You know, we've had kids running through Zoom screens and things like that. I think at the beginning of lockdown, my son became very well known on some of my meetings and just would join in. But it's in terms of, I'm thinking about, you're so self-aware. You've really taken that ability to really look at yourself and be introspective and look at who you want to be as well, and be really decisive about that. So you've made a clear and conscious choice about who it is that you're showing up as. Knowing that much about yourself and your personality, how does that relate to how you manage your team and work with other people?
I think what it's taught me is, you know, and I'm doing a strength finder thing at the moment with several of my team, and I think it shows you that it is more about understanding your strengths and being comfortable that they are strengths and building on them, rather than, you know, trying to find weaknesses or trying to call out weaknesses. We've all got weaknesses, and we've all got things that we're less strong. And I think, you know, I've got a varied team now, you know, kind of, you know, middle-aged, super professional types, and also a younger breed in the team that's kind of trying to build their way up, trying to understand who they are. And, you know, I spend a lot of time with them one-on-one, even if I'm not their direct manager. And that's really important to me. It always helped me in my career, you know, having a mentor, having a coach, somebody to turn to. And I like working with them and giving them some perspective as well. So I would say, yeah, those are the main things for me. Understand your strengths and don't be afraid that they are strengths, and keep building them. And understand your weaknesses and don't be afraid that they're weaknesses. And yeah, you can work on those as well. But for me, we're only human. You can't build everything into a strength. So focus on the things that you can be really good at, that can influence your career, and make yourself the best version of yourself through those.
I love that. I almost I think that's the best quote in terms of career development, and especially because sometimes I think we're seeing the end of an era where we shoebox people into, you have to be great all-rounders. And now there is a real value to that. You know, there is a value. I did coding at a university, and do you know what? I've used it probably in every job I've ever had. And that's been fantastic. So it's nice but I couldn't build something. I can tweak, I can't build anything, but it's nice to have that little rounded edge in that sense. But there is a train of thought that, you know, you need to be great at everything. Which do you think it is? Be kind of like the jack of all or the master of one in terms of strengths? Or maybe I should ask in terms of the finance function.
Yeah, I've always tried to show. I have a finance model in my career, which I plotted on a chart, because I'm a finance guy and an engineer, so that's what both those functions would do. And I've tried to build the disciplines up. You know, the things that have made me capable as a finance leader. Where did they come from? You know, do I need to be the best accountant to be the best finance leader? No. But do you need to know accounting? Clearly you do. And that arises itself every day. You know, do you need to understand costing? Do you need to understand how a bill of material works to have a conversation about pricing, about, you know, price theory, about, you know, about cost of inflation? You don't have to have done that for 5 years to embed it as a finance leader, but you need to understand it. You need to have grasp of that to talk to commercial leaders about pricing and and cost behavior. So there's things like that. There's also many technical aspects of the role as well. The biggest for me was internal control, and understanding SOX and understanding how important internal controls are in an organization. But likewise, tax, treasury, all these things you touch on pretty much every day. And again, one of the younger members of my team is currently doing SEMA, and I spoke to her last week about this, and she was saying, the tax paper is really hard. And I'm saying, yeah, it is. Do you want to be a tax professional? Probably not. Some people do, and that's fine, but probably not. But unfortunately, you will need to know this stuff. It happens every week. We have some kind of conversation about some technical tax matter that you kind of need to reflect on from your educational days. So I think building blocks are important. I think what I'm trying to get my team to understand is that everybody today, not everybody today, but a lot of people today think they can tick the boxes a little too quickly, and that's enough to move on. And when I recruit and when I look at people that I want to bring into senior positions in an organization, for me, you have to embed things on your CV. Doing 1 year end is doesn't make a career. Doing one tax return doesn't make you a tax director. Doing one set of bank reconciliations doesn't make you a financial accountant. It's those things that you need to embed, you need to ingrain them, you need to understand them properly, and then you need to teach others how to do it. And I think once you've done that in a cycle, then you can say, I've ticked that box, and now I can move on to other things. And and for every function, because of the cycles, a year end is once a year. So you can only do a year end every 12 months. You can't do 3 in 3 months and say, okay, I've done 3 year ends. So I think, you've got to, every role will find its own rhythm. And I think, what I'm finding is that the younger members of the team are very eager to move on. And it concerns me that in 10, 15 years time, if they did move on, that they would look back at or there would be in a recruitment process, and the recruiter would look back on their career and say, yeah, you've kind of done it, but you've not really, have you? You've not done it to a level that really matters now. So I'm spending a lot of time getting that kind of embedded layer within them, right, to say, just breathe, relax. I'm going to support you through this. I'm going to help you through this, but you need to just slow down, think it through, and make sure you really, really know this. And as soon as you do, I'll be more than happy to find you your next role. But let's not go too quick.
There's a beautiful synergy there in how that moment in the boardroom with your CEO said, breathe, and the feedback you got in terms of jumping in meetings was breathe, relax, you're okay. And now you're passing that on as well as the knowledge that you have to your team, and the environment and the culture that you're building up is that breathe, relax as well. So just before we reach the end, what would you say the biggest strengths that do you think the biggest impact for you? What are the, say, top 3 strengths that you think a professional finance leader should have or needs to have?
I think the number one thing for me is focus, is the ability to understand what's in front of you, what your objectives are for the year, understand how to get those done, and then move it. I've said several times, I built my career on getting things done and having a long to-do list, and I've learned techniques and ways of making sure that that's doable, and having people around me that can go along with that journey, that accept change happens, and that change can happen at a pace. And I'm a firm believer that you can justify to yourself when you look back on a role and say, I took that role on a journey. It was like this when it started, and it was like this when I finished. And therefore I can, with confidence, stand up in front of any recruiter or in front of my boss and say, I've done that now. I've done it. And I can prove it, and I can talk honestly and sincerely about what I've achieved. And you can see that in the results. So I think that's the number one thing for me. And every role I do, I take that job description, I take that focus, and then I say, okay, I think I know how to make this successful. I'm going to need some help along the way, But I think when I get to the end of this journey, me and my boss and my team will know that that journey is complete. And I want to pass that on to, obviously, to my team as well. And the second thing is this self-reflection and having the ability, and not only on your own style, but, you know, on things that happen, you know, that I've always, when you walk out of the boardroom, when you present it, you know, a management review, and it could be a great meeting or a difficult meeting, it doesn't really matter. But what I always did and still do now, when you walk out of the room, the first thing I do is turn around to whoever is at the side of me, my boss, my peers, my team, and say, okay, how can we do that better next time? You know, how did we show up? What did we do well? What can we improve on? And immediately in the moment, you know, and I'm in a year end at the moment with my current company, and we have that conversation together all the time. Let's not forget this moment because we can make this better next time. So even when we're going through the process, let's record this now. We'll reflect on it in March when the year end is over and the results are published. And then we'll make sure when we get to the half year that we embed this learning in what we do. So I think that's really important for me. And the third thing, because it's been, you know, a relatively long and hard career to get to where I am, I think resilience, I think having the ability to bounce back, having the ability to take criticism, having the ability to maybe stick with something longer than you may wish to make sure that you've got that skill, that experience embedded, I think is it would be my third thing.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that. So we've got focus, we've got resilience, and the middle one was
Self-reflection.
Self-reflection, which I think is the most important one. And it's clearly, all of those things have clearly had a huge impact on you, and you're dealing big, we're talking about big companies as well. So big teams, you know, big amounts of transactions and money to look at in terms of the financial reporting. So it's clearly had not just an impact for you, but also the wider organization. And that's the whole point, isn't it, in terms of these leadership skills, is to have that wider impact. So thank you so much for sharing that and your journey. It's incredible to hear how it went from like really professional tie wearing and being a beast to actually really tapping into something that you already had, I think, from what it sounds like, in terms of this ability to really take information and always get better and challenge yourself and be really open to reflection, even in the face of all other challenges and in different cultures and different people. It's been quite a journey. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Thanks for having me, Alex.